Sometimes it seems like there are just two kinds of therapists: the blank slate therapist and the open book therapist. The therapist who's very traditional and just sits there and nods and doesn't give a lot of feedback and almost seems inhuman, who seems that they're on a pedestal, who makes you feel like you're not as good as them. And then there's the open book therapists, the kind who are on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and everywhere else crying and talking about their mother. Maybe it feels like they're sharing a little bit too much information and you wonder, is this person qualified to help me? They seem like they have a lot of issues. I just want to acknowledge that I'm exaggerating a little bit. There are both of these kinds of therapists out there, but most therapists are somewhere in between. There are benefits and drawbacks to both kinds of therapists. This is a debate even within the therapy world about how much to share. Are we putting ourselves out there too much? Do we need to hold back a bit? Sort of walking this line and figuring this out. This is where we're at as therapists right now. We don't really know exactly, but we do have a sense that it's probably most helpful for us to be more authentic than we used to be as therapists, to share a little more of ourselves and our experience and let ourselves be seen as more human. It's a little bit like thinking about therapy as a partnership rather than an expert and patient kind of relationship. And that's a really good thing. On the other hand, there are some wonderful things that traditional therapy has brought to the therapy process. And one of those is this concept of the blank slate. So what's the blank slate? It's a therapeutic stance where the therapist holds back from showing a lot of themselves. In fact, a lot of therapists traditionally haven't shown much at all of themselves. That can be a little off-putting to clients, but it's also an opportunity for the therapist to see how the client reacts to us, what they project onto us. A lot of times those projections are based on childhood experiences and relationships with parents most often. That provides something for therapists to really grab onto and work with. It's not the kind of thing that is possible in any other relationship. In most friend type relationships, people are projecting back and forth onto each other all the time, but the waters are really muddy because both people are equally invested and equally presenting themselves and putting forth their needs and their ideas and their thoughts. It becomes hard to tell what's a projection and what's just an understandable reaction to that input. So another thing this stance provides is it helps a client feel like they are the center of the therapeutic relationship. In fact, they should be the center of the therapeutic relationship. The work should focus on their needs and what they want to work on. So if the therapist is able to hold back, it means that the client doesn't have to worry about us. They don't have to worry about how we're feeling that day. They don't have to worry about our children. They can just focus on their own problems without feeling like they have to take on the problems of the therapist. You don't get that in any other kind of relationship. And in fact, if that were a friendship relationship, it would be very unhealthy because we want relationships that are mutual, where it's a give and take from both parties, not one person taking all the time or one person giving all the time. So the open book therapist may be challenging some of those ideas by bringing more of themselves into the therapy, by putting more of themselves out there on social media, stuff that their clients may see. For example, if you saw your therapist on TikTok in the morning having a bad day, maybe crying, and you have an appointment with them later in the day, you might go into that appointment a little bit concerned about your therapist, worried about them, hoping that they're feeling better. It's a great normal human response to seeing someone in pain, but also it takes the focus off of you and might make you feel hesitant to bring something up because you feel like the therapist is already having a bad enough day. Why bring up this heavy topic? So that's one reason why therapists are wondering how much is too much to share. It's also possible that that very open book approach may put people off and make them feel like maybe that's not the right therapist for me. They said that they're only into, I don't know, 80s goth music, for example, and they don't like any other kind of music. And I love hip hop. In fact, I want to talk about my love of hip hop in therapy and feel accepted and appreciated for that. So going into the therapy room as a client with an open book type therapist might mean that you have all of the stuff in your head about that person. And that can get in the way of good therapy. But there are drawbacks to the blank slate approach. For example, sometimes therapists who take the blank slate approach seem a little bit uninterested and off-putting. The blank slate therapist might feel like someone who's too distant or who doesn't really care. They may seem kind of inhuman, infallible, or somehow like they're looking down on us. We may need a certain level of empathy and warmth at certain times during our therapy work. Now, the open book therapist can feel much more relatable, can feel like another fellow human being. They can also model for us different ways of being in the world. We might see them enjoying the sunshine out in the world. We might see them meditating, doing yoga, showing us how they achieve a certain level of groundedness or work through some difficult things. So where do I net out in the open book versus blank slate therapist debate? I think there's benefits to both of these approaches, and the best therapists bring in both. They're able to maintain a helpful therapeutic stance in relation to the client, very clear in the boundaries between client and therapist, but they're also able to be flexible and show a certain level of humanity that can be hugely healing for clients. Ultimately, I think it comes down to a personal decision, and you have to really tune in to what feels most helpful to you in the therapy room.